Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. It looks like we do not have Taylor Pride in the courtroom. Taylor Pride is a witness.
Okay. And
it's possible that he may be still making his way into the virtual courtroom.
One moment. Okay, has anyone heard from this witness?
We spoke with the witness approximately 2 hours ago, hour and a half ago. And that's the last time we had contact with the witness.
Okay. I am going to turn off my video and reach out. If anyone hears before I return, will you please just send me a chat or let me know?
Will do, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I think that might be her. Is Taylor Pride in the courtroom now? Two new people have entered the courtroom. Are either of those Taylor Pride? Can I get an answer from the parties? Is anyone aware?
Your Honor, I believe I see Taylor Pride now. Yep.
Okay. Then we'll start with the swearing in. If everyone can raise your right hand. And please indicate by saying I do if you swear to abide by the rules of this proceeding and conduct yourself in a manner that is honorable to this forum.
I do.
Now calling case number 082263, Cam Donaldson versus Karen Baja. I'd first like to start with the housekeeping matters. Are there any housekeeping matters to which the court needs to attend first to the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Dillon, and I represent the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Colleen Latoile for the plaintiff as well.
And Your Honor, the housekeeping matters we have are, first, we request that all witnesses be constructively sworn.
So ordered.
And we request that all sidebars be constructive as well, so that any evaluators may listen into those sidebar conversations.
Ordered.
And Your Honor, we've also prepared a notice of appearance for Your Honor and the jury. May we distribute that through the chat function?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we've also conferred with defense counsel and we've made stipulations. Would you like us to tell you those stipulations now?
Go ahead.
First stipulation, any video, transcript, or mention of Exotic Bob is inadmissible.
Okay.
Second, although we will discuss the attempt to file a restraining order, the restraining order itself, along with its contents, are inadmissible.
Okay.
Any discussion of any will that precedes the will at issue in this trial is inadmissible.
Okay.
And finally, Your Honor, we've stipulated to the admissibility of the will, and we will be using that will in our opening statement.
Okay.
And that is all for the plaintiff, Your Honor.
And for the defense, any housekeeping matters we need to address?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Mason Osborne, along with my co-counsel, Gada Abu Hadar. We represent the defendant, Ms. Karen Baja, and we do have a few preliminary matters whenever the court is ready.
You can proceed.
Would you like for us to formally tender our experts or just lay the foundation?
Formally tender.
And Your Honor, when referring to documents inside the record, would you like for us to refer to the documents by the page number inside of the electronic file?
I will tell you, I do not have the page numbers or the electronic file, so however the parties agree is fine.
Is opposing counsel okay with us referring to the electronic file page?
That's fine. Absolutely.
And Your Honor, would you like for us to read the stipulations in now or when they become relevant?
When they become relevant, please.
Your Honor, normally we would invoke the rule. However, because every witness is either a party or an expert, there's no need to invoke the rule today. And we would also remind the court that this is a non-bifurcated case, so the plaintiff must prove damages. And that wraps up the defense's preliminary matters, Your Honor. We're ready to move forward with opening statements.
Understood. Plaintiff, are there any motions in limine?
No motions in limine, Your Honor.
And none for defense as well?
Your Honor, the previous stipulations that opposing counsel mentioned having to do with Exotic Bob, the previous restraining order, and the other will, those were our pretrial motions. However, we came to an agreement between that, and so there are no pretrial motions at the time.
Great. And as a reminder, if you are not actively conducting a cross-examination, direct examination, opening or closing, if you're not actually speaking, if you could please keep your microphones on mute. And with that, we can proceed to openings. Plaintiff, are you ready to proceed to openings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. Members of the jury, when the defendant, Karen Baja, first met Lou Donaldson back in 2001, he was a self-made millionaire and he was 20 years older than she was. Even though they came from different backgrounds, the defendant and Lou Donaldson got married. It was love at first sight for the both of them. Now, before she met Lou Donaldson, the defendant didn't have much money to her name. But because of Lou's significant fortune, she came to live a very comfortable lifestyle. And because of their shared passion for animals, the two were able to open a wildlife sanctuary called Wild Wildlife, a place where tigers, lions, and leopards could be protected and cared for. They worked there together for a number of years. And over time, the defendant grew deeply attached to the big cats at the sanctuary. She cared for them around the clock and she treated them like they were her children. For a while, it looked like the defendant had left her humble background behind her. But in June of 2012, the defendant and Lou Donaldson's relationship went south. And then for the defendant, the unthinkable happened. Lou told her he wanted a divorce. She was stunned. And members of the jury, that's when the defendant got scared. Faced with losing everything that she'd come to rely on, her financial stability, the tigers, lions, and leopards that she treated like her own children, the defendant made a decision that she was not going to let Lou Donaldson take it all away from her. And that is why on August 17th, 2012, the defendant killed Lou Donaldson and staged his disappearance to cover her tracks. She then created a phony last will and testament that left all of Lou's property, including Wild Wildlife, to herself and herself alone. This is a fake will. And you will see that it was the defendant, not Lou Donaldson, who signed this will. We will prove that to you. Members of the jury, this is a wrongful death case brought by Lou Donaldson's only surviving child, Cam Donaldson, against the defendant, Karen Baja. My name is Colleen Latoile, and I, along with my co-counsel, Thomas Dillon, represent the plaintiff. Because of the defendant's actions, Cam Donaldson sits here in this courtroom today without her father, who was her closest confidant and the man that she looked up to for her entire life. You will hear that just 2 days after the defendant staged Lou Donaldson's disappearance, she then ousted Cam Donaldson from her long-standing role as Lou's assistant at Wild Wild Life. As a result, Cam Donaldson not only lost her father, but the family business and everything that her father had built while he was alive. The defendant's plan to keep Lou Donaldson from leaving her with nothing meant taking everything from Cam Donaldson. And we are here to hold her liable for it. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is a wrongful death case. And as the plaintiff in a wrongful death case, we have the burden of proving to you by a preponderance of the evidence, which means it's more likely than not that the defendant caused the death of Lou Donaldson. We welcome that burden. And when you see the compelling circumstantial evidence in this case, you will know that the defendant is liable. Now, I mention that because after this trial, the judge is going to give you some instructions on the law. And I want you to pay careful attention to the instruction on circumstantial evidence, because you will learn that circumstantial evidence is just as compelling as direct evidence. It can be just as strong, and in this case, it is. You see, when the defendant planned to stage Lou Donaldson's disappearance and inherit his estate through a fake will, she made a few critical mistakes along the way. We will show you those mistakes, and those mistakes will tell you everything that you need to know about what really happened to Lou Donaldson. Members of the jury, in this case, the truth is in the timeline. For example, the defense will ask you to believe that on June 12th, 2012, Lou Donaldson tried to get a restraining order against the defendant, and then 2 days later, wrote a will leaving everything to her. The evidence will show that the defendant wasn't thinking about the timing of it all when she wrote that will. You will also hear that on the very same night that Lou Donaldson disappeared, the defendant drove away from her home at 3 o'clock in the morning, leaving her phone behind, allegedly going to the grocery store when her car broke down on the side of the road. Is this just a total coincidence? The evidence will show that it is not. The defendant's story is simply a cover for the fact that she was out leaving her husband's van at an airstrip 40 miles away to make it look like he had just gone out for a flight in one of his planes and never came back. But when you look at the timeline in this case, you will see right through the defendant's story. And that is why, at the end of today's trial, we will ask that you hold the defendant liable for the wrongful death of Lou Donaldson and award damages to Cam Donaldson, Lou's only child, who will never again stop by her dad's house for a Sunday supper. Never again go into work on a Monday morning and check in with him. You can't bring back Cam Donaldson's father, but you can give Cam Donaldson back everything that the defendant took from her. And at the end of this trial, that is exactly what we will ask you to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Defense, are you ready to proceed with opening?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I cannot imagine what it is like to be grieving the death of your husband and have to defend yourself against a lawsuit saying you had something to do with it. This is not a case about searching for answers. This is a case about seeking revenge. The plaintiff is Lou Donaldson's only surviving child. Growing up, The plaintiff worked side by side with her father for 20 years at Wild Wild Life, and she was certain of one thing, that her father had two loves, the plaintiff and Wild Wild Life. But this all changed when Lou Donaldson fell in love with Karen Baja. Not surprisingly, the plaintiff hated Miss Baja. The plaintiff hated that Miss Baja was now in her father's life. The plaintiff hated that she now had to share her father. The plaintiff hated that Miss Baja was now helping run Wild Wild Life. And most of all, the plaintiff hated that her father chose to leave his estate to his wife. You will learn here today that it took the plaintiff 6 years to file this lawsuit. Not the first year after her father went missing, not the second year, not the third year, not the fourth year, but the 6th year when Miss Baja received Lou Donaldson's estate. This is not a case about searching for answers. This is a case about seeking revenge. We are proud to represent Karen Baja. Karen, if you could turn your camera on for a minute. Like many of us, Karen didn't come from much. She was a poor girl in a small town, making her way through life the best way she knew how. When she first met Lou Donaldson, he pulled over and offered her a ride. Little did she know that this ride would last for years. This simple car ride turned into a night together, into love, and soon into marriage. Lou brought Karen home to Wild Wild Life and told her that he wanted her to be a part of the family operation. But this did not sit well with the plaintiff. Soon enough, Karen fell in love with caring for those small cats. It was Lou's passion at first, but Karen fully immersed herself in it. And soon enough, she began caring about the cubs more than Lou did. No marriage is perfect, and no one wants to come to court and air out their dirty laundry, but because the plaintiff has brought this suit, Miss Karen Baja has to. Karen will tell you today that in the summer of 2012, she learned that Lou Donaldson was having an affair with a woman in Costa Rica. And while Karen was slaving over the cubs at Wild Wild Life and taking care of them, Lou Donaldson was taking secretive, on-a-whim trips to Costa Rica to see his mistress. He would fly without logging a flight plan, without registering his planes, because he wanted to stay off the radar. You see, when you fly without logging a flight plan, it's hard for anyone to know where you're going, where you're coming from, or where you are. The night of Lou Donaldson's disappearance, Karen Baja was alone at Wild Wild Life. You see, a tiger had just given birth, and Karen, tired and wiping the sleep out of her eyes, got into the car to go get food to feed these cubs. As is pretty common with these tiger births, the mother rejected the cubs, and these babies, only minutes old, were completely reliant on Karen for food and nutrition. She started her trek out to the grocery store, and on her way back, her car broke down. She realized she didn't have her phone, so she got out of the car, flagged down a passing vehicle, and asked them to use their phone. It was 3 a.m, so she called her brother, a deputy sheriff. She knew he would be out working and would be able to just swing by and come get her. He did just that and brought her straight back to Wild Wild Life so she could take care of those babies. The next morning, Karen Baja woke up and she knew something was wrong. She rolled over and saw that Lou Donaldson was not next to her, and she knew he was in trouble. She soon received information that his van was found at a local airstrip, so she had her brother drive her out there. And on the way, she was praying that once she got to the airstrip, she would open up the van and Lou would be sitting there waiting for her, but all she found were his glasses and his keys. For 5 years, Karen Baja waited for Lou Donaldson to come home. For 5 years, she hoped, she prayed that he would bust through the front door, call her, anything to show her that he loved her and he was coming home. But after 5 years, she needed to seek closure. On the 5-year anniversary of Lou Donaldson's death, Karen Baja had him declared legally dead. Because the plaintiff brought this suit, they bear the burden of proof, the preponderance of the evidence, that Karen intentionally or recklessly caused the death of Lou Donaldson. The plaintiff knows that they will not be able to meet this burden because they won't even be able to prove how Lou Donaldson died when he died, or that Karen had anything to do with it. And because the plaintiff knows that, we're going to hear a lot about a will today. But we need to remind you that this is not a will contest. This is a suit for wrongful death. But because the plaintiff is going to make this about a will, we will call Chris Renard to the stand. And we need to remind you that we did not hire Chris Renard. Chris Renard has worked at Summit Life Insurance, the company that issued Lou Donaldson his life insurance policy, for 20 years. Chris Renard has 20 years of experience in forensic document examination and insurance claims investigation. And Chris Renard will sit on the stand today and tell you that he found no reason to deny Karen Baja's claim for Lou Donaldson's life insurance policy. You'll also hear today that the sheriff's office launched a full investigation of Lou Donaldson's disappearance. They did a forensic examination of Lou Donaldson's van where they found no hair, no human DNA, no human blood, and no signs of foul play. They did the same thing at Wild Wildlife where they found no hair, no human DNA, no human blood, and no signs of foul play. The plaintiff knows that they will not be able to meet the burden of preponderance of the evidence. And they know that they have nothing to offer you here today. And they know that Karen Baja is not liable. Hold her not liable.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
I apologize. Thank you. Is the plaintiff ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Cam Donaldson. Good afternoon, Ms. Donaldson. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Cam Donaldson.
And Ms. Donaldson, where are you from?
I'm from Pioneer, Statesville.
Do you still live in Pioneer?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any family that lives in Pioneer?
I used to. My father, Lou Donaldson, before he died.
Ms. Donaldson, we'll discuss your father in a bit more in a moment, but first, I'd like to ask, was your father married?
Yes, he was.
Who was he married to?
Karen Baja, the defendant.
Do you know whether the defendant is in the courtroom today?
I believe I did see her on the screen. She's wearing what looks to be a animal print shirt when I saw her.
Your Honor, if I could just have the defendant turn on her camera so that the witness can identify her for the record. Ms.
Yes,
Donaldson,
I see her.
Sorry, could you just tell us one more time what identify the defendant by an article of clothing?
Yes, she's wearing a patterned shirt with a black blazer.
Thank you. When did your father and the defendant get married?
I believe it was about 2001.
And could you tell us a bit about their marriage?
Well, at first, my father's friends and family were rather hesitant about the onset of their relationship. It was a bit untraditional. They met when Karen was hitchhiking and my father picked her up. And it was also untraditional because Karen is 20 years younger than my father. So we were hesitant at first, but they had a shared passion for big cats, which unsurprisingly is not a very normal shared passion to have. And I ultimately supported anything my father did. So I worked hard to support that relationship with them.
You mentioned that they had a shared passion for big cats. Could you elaborate on that a bit more for us?
Yes. So they love to rescue and take care of big cats such as lions and tigers. My father actually started a cat sanctuary called Wild Wildlife doing just that.
Did the defendant work at Wild Wildlife?
Yes, she did. She mostly spent time taking care of the cats.
And could you elaborate on that just a bit more for us?
So as her role, she would care for the cubs. She would also make sure that they were well fed, as well as their habitats were cleaned and well kept for. You know, Karen really loves those animals. She treats them like her children. And so that's pretty much all that she spent her days doing and continues to do at Wild Wildlife.
Did you have any role at Wild Wildlife, Ms. Donaldson?
Yes, I actually worked on the opposite end in the business side of things. I worked as my father's assistant for several years, decades, and spent all my time helping him with financial aspects of the business, with ordering supplies, making sure things were all well kept so that the business could keep running smoothly.
Now I'd like to switch gears here a bit and direct your attention to the time period of June 2012. What, if anything, happened then between your father and the defendant?
Well, June 2012 was a few months before my father disappeared. And it was also when my father and Karen's relationship really took a turn for the worse.
What do you mean by that?
Well, primarily, my father told Karen that he wanted a divorce from her, and she didn't take it well, so much so that my father tried to file for a restraining order against her.
Now, directing your attention to the date of June 12th, 2012, do you recall that date?
Yes, that was the date that my father tried to file for a restraining order.
And moving on to August 17th, 2012, does that date mean anything to you?
That was the last day that I ever saw my father.
Could you tell us a bit more about that day?
Well, it was like any other day. I remember it was a Friday, so we were closing up shop, making sure everything was nice and tidy in the office before the weekend. It was around 6 o'clock, and my father and I were still at the office. And he leaves his office and, says his usual things. I'll see you on Monday, unless you decide to come over for Sunday supper, which I like to do regularly. And he seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary, said goodbyes, and I never saw him again.
Ms. Donaldson, had your father ever disappeared before?
No, never. He would leave for a few days at a time. He'd fly off in his private planes, but he would always tell me where he was going, how long he'd be gone. He always confided in me because that was the kind of relationship we had.
And on that date of August 17th, 2012, was your father still married to the defendant?
Yes, he was.
And do you know if your father lived with the defendant at that time?
As far as I know, yes, they were still living together.
Do you know if anybody else lived with them?
No.
Did the defendant do anything after that date of August 17th, 2012?
About 3 days after the 17th, after my father disappeared, that Monday on August 19th, or 20th, apologies, she fired me from my position as my father's assistant.
Did the defendant do anything else other than that?
Well, several years after my father disappeared, she had him declared legally dead. And she produced a will of my father's.
Directing court and counsel to what's been constructively marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1, which for reference is on page 53 of the record. And Ms. Donaldson, I'll direct you to page 53 of the record. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
How?
It is the will that my father allegedly signed, leaving everything to Karen.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that exhibit?
Yes.
Moving Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 into evidence, Your Honor.
Any objection from defense?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
And permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Donaldson, had you ever seen this will before the defendant produced it?
No.
And what is the date on this will?
It is June 14th, 2012.
And just to refresh our memory, what was the date when your father tried to get a restraining order?
June 12th, 2012.
Now I want to talk a bit more about your father. Directing court and counsel to what's been constructively marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 2, which for reference is on page 27 of the record. And Ms. Donaldson, I'll direct you to page 27. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, it's my favorite photo of me and my father from when I was a child.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that exhibit?
Yes.
Moving Plaintiff's Exhibit 2 into evidence, Your Honor.
Any objection from defense?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted.
Permission to publish?
Yes.
Ms. Donaldson, how has the loss of your father affected you?
It changed my life forever. Nothing will ever be the same, and I'll never get to see him again, and I'll never get to be a part of his legacy and help his dream to continue thriving, because Karen took any option or possibility of that away from me. And she took my father away from me, and I'll never ever get to see him again, and I'll never be the same.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. You worked with your father for 20 years at Wild Wildlife.
Yes.
After she married your father, Miss Baja began working at Wild Wildlife too.
Correct.
But you did not have a good relationship with Miss Baja.
We didn't get along. Correct.
In fact, you said you hoped Miss Baja was attacked by one of her tigers.
I have said things in the past that are rather strong. Yes.
In the past, you also said that you hoped Miss Baja was eaten by one of her tigers.
Correct.
In your words, you hate Miss Baja.
I definitely am not a fan of her.
You claim that the will Miss Baja presented is a forgery.
Correct.
You did not sue her to contest your father's will.
I sued her for several reasons.
You're aware this is a wrongful death case.
Correct.
You did not sue her for fraud.
No.
You did not sue her for forgery of the will.
Correct.
You can't believe that this would be your father's will because he left you completely out of it.
It's suspicious. Yes.
Because there's no way that your father would leave you out of his will, right?
Well, we did have a good relationship.
But your father did leave you out of his life insurance policy.
Correct.
Your father made Karen Baja the sole beneficiary of that life insurance policy.
His wife. Yes.
Not you.
Correct.
You also claim that the last time you saw your father, he didn't make any mention of going out of the country.
Correct.
Mr. Donaldson was a pilot.
Yes, he flew planes.
He often flew to Costa Rica.
Yes.
But you do not believe he flew to Costa Rica the weekend he disappeared.
Correct. He would have told me like he did every time he left.
He would have told you. You knew Mr. Donaldson had a mistress in Costa Rica, didn't he?
I'm not aware. I don't recall if I knew at that time.
You do not know about Mr. Donaldson's mistress in Costa Rica?
I don't recall if I knew at the time that he left, and no.
So to clarify, Mr. Donaldson did not tell you about her.
Correct.
He did not tell you that he would fly to Costa Rica to see her.
He would tell me when he would fly to Costa Rica, yes.
Mr. Donaldson's pilot's license had been suspended before he disappeared.
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson also did not properly register his planes.
Correct. Not all of them.
You know what a flight plan is, right?
Yes.
A flight plan tells everyone where a pilot is going.
Correct.
You would agree with me that flying without a flight plan makes it hard to be tracked.
I suppose.
Flying without a flight plan makes it hard for anyone to know where you're going.
I suppose.
So that's a yes.
Yeah.
Flying without a flight plan makes it hard for anyone to know where you are.
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson had a tendency to fly without logging a flight plan, didn't he?
I believe so. Yes.
Your Honor, may I have a moment to confer with my notes and with with co-counsel? No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Donaldson, how often would your father go on flights?
Oh, it was regular, one of his hobbies that he liked to do.
And how often would he tell you where he was going on those flights?
He would always tell me how long he'd be gone and often where he'd go.
When he would go on those flights, did he always come back?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, you can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Taylor Pride. Good evening.
Good evening.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Taylor Pride.
And Mr. Pride, where do you live?
I live right here in Pioneer, right here in Statesville.
Are you employed?
I am. I'm a private investigator for my own firm, Pride Investigation.
Would you please explain to the jury what a private investigator does?
Sure. So I'm reached out to either party in any given case, and I'm asked to look at all the facts and data surrounding that case to analyze it, to see if I can make any additional findings of fact or can figure out what happened.
How did you become a private investigator?
I actually started out here in the Pioneer Police Department. I spent 16 years there as a detective.
And during your 16 years with the Pioneer Police Department, would you please explain what you did as a detective?
Sure. As a detective, I worked on every type of case you could possibly imagine over the course of 16 years, including economic crimes and murders.
Were you assigned to any particular division with the Pioneer Police Department?
I was. For about 6 years, I was assigned to the economics crimes unit.
And what kind of work did you do with the economic crime unit?
I mainly analyzed forgeries.
Now, when you say you mainly analyzed forgeries, what do you mean by that?
Well, when looking at a forgery, the most important thing is looking at the handwriting to detect if there's any fraud involved. So a lot of times I'll compare handwriting samples to the original in order to determine if it's accurate.
And what kinds of documents are you investigating for these handwriting samples?
I've done a lot of everything, made a lot of wills and testaments in my profession, but also other documents as well.
Have you received any training to investigate forgeries?
I have. When I got into the economic crime unit, I did a handwriting seminar by the American Association of Handwriting Analysis, and I also attend an annual training every year to keep up with the latest trends in the field, as well as reading up-to-date literature and other exercises to keep my edge.
And what is the American Association of Handwriting Analysts?
Well, it's the premier organization for graphology and document examination in my field.
Do you have any certifications in that field?
I do. So every 4 years, I recertify for the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners. And that is the certification that's renowned in my field that provides qualifications to people like me that do examine forgeries.
And is examining wills and testaments, examining the handwriting on those kinds of documents, are those the types of things that experts in the field of forensic document examination do?
Yes.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in this field before?
I have, 15 times, in fact.
Your Honor, at this time, we move to admit Taylor Pride as an expert in criminal investigations and forensic document examination.
Does defense have an objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Then Mr. Pride will be admitted as an expert in forensic document examination.
And is he also admitted as an expert in criminal investigations, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pride, how did you become involved in this case?
So Cam Donaldson reached out to me in about July of 2017 to look into the disappearance of her father.
And what did you do when Ms. Donaldson reached out to you?
So I started with the Pioneer County Sheriff's Office investigation, reviewing all the documents associated with that. But I also, in this case, looked at Mr. Donaldson's court records, his financial statements, and as well as his will and testament.
Now, you mentioned that you reached out to the Pioneer County Sheriff's Department. During your investigation, did you become aware of the status of their investigation into this case?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
I'm not asking for a statement, Your Honor. I'm asking this expert if they have become aware of the status of the Pioneer Police Department's case.
Your Honor, may I respond, Your Honor?
You may respond.
The only way he'd have become aware is gathering information by speaking to the Pioneer County Sheriff's Department.
Is this answer that you're intending to elicit being introduced for the truth?
Your Honor, this won't be brought in for the truth of the matter. This will be brought in to show the effect it had on the listener. And I proffer that this will be the basis of what informed this expert's investigation into this case, or part of the basis, pardon me.
Then overruled with that limited exception.
And once again, Mr. Pride, did you ever become aware of the status of the Sheriff's Department's investigation into this case?
I did.
And what was that status?
So the status still shows that the case is active despite Ms. Baja declaring Mr. Donaldson dead.
How did that influence your investigation into the case?
Well, it just shows that there's a lot left unturned. So I myself decided to look deeper into the case and the circumstances revolving around Mr. Donaldson's disappearance.
Now, you mentioned that you investigated Mr. Donaldson's will.
Yes, it was one of the materials I looked at for my findings.
Directing court and counsel's attention to what has already been admitted as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. Mr. Pride, for your reference, this is on page 53 of the record. Do you have page 53 of the record?
I do.
And do you recognize that exhibit?
Yeah, this is the last will and testament of Mr. Lou Donaldson that I reviewed.
And is that exhibit a fair and accurate representation of that will?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to publish Plaintiff's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please explain to the jury what they are seeing here?
Yeah, so this, to the unseen eye, just seems like any sort of ordinary will and testament that you would see in my field. But I found a couple aspects of this will to be pretty suspicious.
What aspects did you find to be suspicious?
Well, the first is the language of the will itself. If you look to the second paragraph towards the top, it says, I appoint Karen Baja to be the sole executor of this will, and if I should die or disappear, I give to Karen Baja absolutely all of my real and personal property whatsoever. What stood out to me in that language is the language or disappear. In over 20 years of experience I have in looking at documents like this, I've never seen that language anywhere before.
And considering that you had worked in your field reviewing documents like this for 20 years, and you hadn't seen this language, what did that make you, how did that influence your investigation into this particular will?
Well, I decided to look a little closer at other aspects of the will, such as the signatures on it and the circumstances surrounding the will when it was signed.
When you looked deeper into this will and you focused on the signature, what conclusion were you able to come to?
I concluded that there's a high probability that the signature was forged.
And how did you come to that particular conclusion?
Well, in my field, there's 3 steps that go along with handwriting analysis. First, you have to collect samples of the handwriting. Then you have to analyze those samples for distinct features. And then finally, after identifying some of those features, you compare the samples to assure that they were written by the same person. So for this case, I looked at Lou Donaldson's signature on other documents, including the restraining order that he applied for, his driver's license, as well as a note that he had written to his daughter, Cam, and compared it to the signature on this will to see if they were a match.
And when you were comparing the signatures, what kinds of things were you looking to compare?
So some of the features that are common in any person's handwritings are how big are the loops, if you maybe have an L or an O in your name, or if somebody tends to scribble their signature, meaning they have a lot of tails or cut off letters in their handwriting, just any sort of distinctions that would carry over based on time and situation from one signature to the next.
And how is the signature that we see on this will different from the other 2 that you compared it to?
So this signature is distinctly different in a few different ways. So what you'll notice if you were to see the other signatures is that the loops on the L and the O are quite different than those other samples. And the other thing that really jumped out to me about this signature, as opposed to just having a lot of tailed or crazy off letters, this is written very deliberately. You can tell that the person lifted the pen up and down very carefully as they were writing it, as opposed to, again, those other samples that I mentioned.
Now, Mr. Pride, I'd like to direct your attention to the bottom of this last will and testament, particularly to what's underneath what is titled Second Witness. Would you please tell the jury what they are looking at underneath Second Witness?
Sure. So the second witness to this will and testament is the woman that was supposed to receive everything in the will, and that is Karen Baja.
In your expert opinion, Mr. Pride, is it common for someone who signs as a witness to also be someone who's a beneficiary of that will?
No, it is not.
Now, you also mentioned that you investigated the circumstances surrounding Mr. Donaldson's disappearance. What else did you investigate?
So again, one of the other things I looked at is the circumstances and what was going on with Mr. Donaldson on June 14th when this will was supposedly signed. And it was suspicious to me that he had filed a restraining order against Karen Baja, the sole beneficiary of this will, just 2 days prior to this will being signed. Additionally, the other witness on this will, Samantha Lane, I had reached out to her to see if she witnessed Mr. Donaldson signing it. And she communicated to me that she didn't not only see Mr. Donaldson signing it, but that Miss Baja had made a death threat against her as well, if she said otherwise.
Your Honor, are you able to hear me?
I could not hear you. I saw that you were trying to say something. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I guess my mic wasn't picking up. But at the very beginning of this witness's statement, I was objecting to say in relation to Ms. Lane's statement. So we would move to strike that as hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this would come in as an exception to the hearsay rule under 8033. This goes to the intent of the declarant, and it also goes to the effect of the listener, Mr. Pride, as to how he altered his investigation after hearing this.
Okay, overruled.
Would you please retell the jury what else you discovered during your investigation?
Sure. So as I mentioned just a minute ago, Samantha Lane had communicated to me that Ms. Baja had threatened to kill her if she didn't say that she had witnessed Mr. Donaldson sign this document.
And how did that impact your investigation into the disappearance of Mr. Donaldson?
Well, it further solidified my hypothesis that this will had been forged and led me to believe that Ms. Baja was responsible for Lou Donaldson's death.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Pride, you were hired by the plaintiff to investigate Lou Donaldson's disappearance.
That's right.
And to analyze his will.
Yeah, mainly just to look into the disappearance of Mr. Donaldson, but that was a part of my analysis when I undertook the job.
But you know this is not a will contest.
A will contest?
Yes, you know that the plaintiff is not contesting the will. You know this is a wrongful death suit.
I know this is a wrongful death case. I guess I'm not sure understanding your question if this is disputing a will or not.
Well, Mr. Pride, let's talk about the real reason we're here, and that's Lou Donaldson's disappearance, not a will. You're an investigator.
I am an investigator, yes.
You've been an investigator for 20 years.
Yeah, over 20 years, in fact.
Lou Donaldson disappeared in 2012.
Yes, that's right.
And you were hired by the plaintiff in 2017.
Yeah, July of 2017.
So 5 years later, after Mr. Donaldson disappeared.
That's right.
5 years before you looked at one piece of evidence.
Correct.
5 years before you interviewed one witness.
That's right.
You agree it's important to conduct a thorough investigation.
Yes. Unlike the Pioneer Sheriff's County, I wanted to make sure that no stone went unturned in this case.
You wanted to make sure that you did everything possible.
Yes, of course.
To interview as many people as you can.
Yeah.
To follow the evidence wherever it might lead you.
That's right.
And even recognize there might not be any evidence.
That's a possibility.
You never went to Wild Wildlife.
No.
You never inspected Lou Donaldson's van.
I didn't. All those were contained in the records of the Pioneer Sheriff County's investigation.
You did not look at any of Lou Donaldson's flight plans.
His what plans? I'm sorry, you cut out.
You did not review any of Lou Donaldson's flight plans.
No.
You did not speak to anyone at the sheriff's department.
No.
You did not interview any police officers.
I just looked at the documents that were published for their investigation.
You did not speak to Ms. Baja.
No.
You did not speak to Carl Bannister.
No, I didn't conduct any interviews, but I did review their statements made in preparations for this case.
You did not speak to Carl Bannister, although you knew that Carl Bannister was with Ms. Baja on the night that Lou Donaldson disappeared.
From the materials I reviewed, that's right.
In fact, the only person you interviewed in your investigation was the plaintiff.
Yeah, as custom in my field, when I'm hired, I want to get to know who hired me and get some basic facts around the case before I delve in and review all the materials that are available.
So just to get this clear, you did not speak to anyone from the sheriff's department, did not go look at the van, did not go to Wild Wildlife. The only person you spoke to was the plaintiff.
Objection, Your Honor, this is a compound question.
Your Honor, this is Cross.
Can you repeat the question?
I just want to be clear. You did not speak to anyone or go to any place where Lou Donaldson was at during your investigation. Yes or no?
No, I didn't.
But you expect everyone here to believe that you conducted a thorough investigation into Lou Donaldson's disappearance.
Sure. I mean, I reviewed all the materials that were available to the case from all parties. That not only included what I got from Miss Donaldson, but also what you all made available to me, as well as the Pioneer Sheriff's investigation records.
Well, speaking of things that you reviewed, I'm glad that you brought that up. You reviewed Chris Renard's report.
I did.
You know who Chris Renard is?
Yeah, he's the insurance investigator for Summit Life.
Chris Renard was hired by Summit Life to investigate specifically whether Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson.
As customary before insurance companies issue payouts, yes, my understanding is that's his job.
And after Chris Renard's independent investigation, the Renard report stated there was absolutely no evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson. You're aware of that?
I don't know if the report said no evidence. I disagree with, but I know that Mr. Renard's opinion is that the will was not forged.
You're aware that in the Renard report, he stated there was no evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson.
I'd have to look at the report again in order to be certain.
You know that the police did not list anyone as a suspect.
No, it's an active investigation.
The police did not list Karen Baja as a suspect.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Actually, the police did not expect any foul play in Lou Donaldson's disappearance.
Not that I'm aware of.
Is that a yes or no?
I am not aware of the police department having any suspects at this time. Again, maybe in light of my findings in this case, maybe the investigation will make some progress.
Well, Mr. Pride, before you came here and testified today, you had plenty of time to review all the documents because you're an expert.
That's right.
And you stated you reviewed all the documents.
I did.
But now you're not aware of certain things in those documents.
No, what I'm saying is I'm not aware of a specific suspect that the Pioneer Sheriff County has listed in the death or disappearance of Lou Donaldson.
Let's talk about Lou Donaldson. You know that he often flew to Costa Rica?
That's right.
But you believe that it's unlikely he flew to Costa Rica.
Yeah, his financial records didn't indicate any spending since August of the year he disappeared, as well as the reading glasses and keys that were left in his van led me to believe that it's unlikely that he disappeared in this case.
Mr. Pride, the only financial record you looked at was one bank statement.
From, yeah, one bank, yes.
You're aware that Mr. Donaldson's worth $5 million.
That's right.
He owns multiple planes.
He does.
He owns a $5 million estate as well.
Correct.
So you think a man with all that money only has one bank account?
It's the only bank account I'm aware of. Again, it's one that was used up until his disappearance. So he may have others. I don't know.
Exactly. He might have other ways of producing money. You're not aware if he has any offshore bank accounts.
No, I'm not.
You do not know if he has any hidden cash.
No, nothing that I had in the materials I reviewed indicated as such, but I guess that's not certain.
You do not know if he had any other just regular bank accounts.
No, again, not from the financial records I reviewed. Again, that seemed the one that the family primarily relied on, but that's all I was made aware of.
So you were limited in your investigation.
I disagree with that. Again, I reviewed materials supplied by you all, supplied by the defense, and in the investigation.
You know that Costa Rica is 2,200.
Yes, roughly, I guess. I don't fly there often.
It would take Lou Donaldson's plane about 3 to 4 tanks of gas to get there.
I'm not a pilot, so I don't really know that.
Mr. Pride, in your deposition, that's exactly what you said, that it would take 3 to 4 tanks of gas for him to get there.
I mean, that's my guess. Again, counsel, I'm not a pilot.
You're aware that Lou Donaldson often flew to Costa Rica and did not list any of his flight plans.
That's true. He had a plane to himself, so he wasn't traveling by any airline, that's for sure.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Pride, on cross-examination, you were asked if this was a will contest or if the will was being contested here in this case. Were you asked to investigate the will?
Not specifically, it's just where my investigation led me. Again, when Cam Donaldson approached me, she just wanted to find out if her dad was still alive.
Did your investigation into the will help to inform your investigation into this case?
It did. As I testified earlier, I believe it's a forgery.
And your conclusion that the will was a forgery, did that influence your investigation into the disappearance of Lou Donaldson?
Yes. Once I decided that the signature was likely forged, I looked into other circumstances that led me to believe that Ms. Baja was responsible for Lou Donaldson's death.
Now, on cross-examination, defense counsel asked if you found any evidence while you were doing your investigation in this case. Did you find evidence in this case?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I, again, reviewed the bank statements as well as looked at all of the records in the Pioneer Sheriff's investigation, as well as talking to Samantha Lane myself regarding her witnessing the will. So I guess you might call that evidence.
And so when you're investigating things like wills and testaments, or when you're doing criminal investigations into someone's disappearance, would you consider those things evidence?
Sure.
And did that evidence help to lead you to a conclusion?
It did.
And would you please tell...
This has already been went through.
What is the objection?
Cumulative or asked and answered, Your Honor. This has already been talked about 3 or 4 different times on redirect.
Counsel, how much further do you intend to go into this? I'll allow a little bit of leeway, but I don't want to rehash everything that's been talked about on direct.
This was the last question, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Once again, Mr. Pride, Did that evidence help you to reach a conclusion?
Yes, that Karen Baja was responsible for Lou Donaldson's death.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the plaintiff have any other witnesses they'd like to call?
Plaintiff does not have any further witnesses. At this time, the plaintiff rests.
And defense, are there any outstanding motions that we need to address at this point?
Yes, Your Honor. May we be heard outside the presence of the jury?
Yes.
The defense moves for a judgment as a matter of law. Even when viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the plaintiff, no reasonable jury can find by the preponderance of the evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson. The plaintiff has failed to prove how Lou Donaldson died, when Lou Donaldson died, and most certainly that Karen Baja caused his death.
At this point, while defense has made good arguments, the court is going to deny that motion. And I guess I can ask the parties, are we wanting to proceed straight to the defense's case, or would y'all like to take a break?
Your Honor, we're okay with a 5-minute break if that's okay with the court.
That works. Okay, let's see everyone back in here. Let's just call it 5:15. About 8 minutes, if that works.
Perfect. And Your Honor, may I just point out for those of us in the Eastern time zone that would be 7:15?
A very good point. Math's not my strong suit. Fantastic.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, see y'all soon. All right, welcome back. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes,
Okay.
Your Honor. Thank you.
Defense, call your first witness.
The defense calls Chris Renard. Will you tell us your name, please?
My name is Chris Renard.
What do you do for a living?
I am an insurance claims investigator and forensic document examiner for Summit Life Insurance Company.
How long have you been a forensic document examiner?
23 years.
And how long have you been an insurance claims investigator?
20 years.
How are you involved in this case?
So I was assigned by Summit Life Insurance Company to determine two things. One, whether Ms. Baja killed Lou Donaldson, and two, whether Ms. Baja forged Lou Donaldson's last will and testament.
What were you looking at to answer those two questions?
I investigated Mr. Donaldson's will and the disappearance, as well as the validity of the will.
What was your recommendation to Summit Life Insurance Company?
I recommended that Summit Life pay the claim.
Before we get into why you recommended that Summit Life pay the claim to Ms. Baja, I want to get to know you a little bit better. Will you tell us about where you went to school?
Well, from 1991 to 1996, I attended Summit College, where I received a bachelor's degree in criminology.
And once you graduated, did you go anywhere after that?
After I graduated from Summit, I went to Statesville Police Academy and graduated from there in 1997.
Were you hired anywhere as a police officer once you graduated?
From 1997 to 2000, I was at the Statesville Bureau of Investigation as a crime lab forensic document examiner. I left there in 2000 and started working at Summit Life Insurance Company as an investigator and forensic document examiner, where I currently work.
What do you do as an insurance claims investigator?
I verify the insurance claims by collecting and preserving critical evidence and documentation. I also conduct interviews and I review police reports.
So how do you go about doing that?
So I investigate the circumstances surrounding the incident to attempt to determine what actually happened.
How long have you been doing that?
About 20 years.
You also mentioned that you were a forensic document examiner. I mean, what exactly is that?
Essentially, I just look at documents to determine whether the document is authentic or whether the signature that appears on a document is in fact from the person who signed it.
Do you do anything to further your education in forensic document examination?
Yeah, I attend annual trainings, workshops, and continuing education courses related to forensic document examination and insurance claim investigation.
Do you specialize in any particular area?
Yeah, I have a specialization in handwriting, signature identification, fabricated documents, and altered records.
How long have you been specializing in that area?
23 years.
Your Honor, this time the defense moves to tender Mr. Bernard as an expert in insurance claims investigation and as an expert in forensic document examination.
Plaintiff have an objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
This witness will be admitted as an expert in insurance. I'm sorry, if you could, forensic document examination and insurance investigations?
Yes, Your Honor, insurance claims investigations, insurance investigations.
Okay, you can proceed.
Mr. Bernard, what did you review when verifying Ms. Baja's claim?
I looked at Lou Donaldson's last will and testament. I reviewed known signatures of Lou Donaldson. I interviewed witnesses, and I also spoke to police officers.
Is that the type of thing that experts in your field reasonably rely upon?
Yes.
Is it based on sufficient facts and data?
Yes.
And is your opinion to a professional degree of reasonable certainty?
Yes.
What is your opinion regarding the validity of Ms. Baja's will?
Whether the signature on the will is a forgery or not is inconclusive.
What was your opinion as to whether Summit Life should pay the claim?
I found there was no reason to deny Ms. Baja's claim. I recommended to Summit Life that we should pay the claim.
Why did you recommend that Summit Life pay Ms. Baja's claim?
There was absolutely no evidence that Ms. Baja killed her husband.
How were you able to determine that there was absolutely no evidence that Ms. Baja killed Lou Donaldson?
I interviewed a contact I have in the Pioneer Sheriff's Office.
And What information did you gather from this interview?
The sheriff's office found no evidence of a crime, including no evidence of a struggle, no blood, no DNA in the home or the van of Mr. Donaldson.
When was Mr. Donaldson last seen alive?
August 17th, 2012.
Has the sheriff's department listed anyone as a suspect?
No.
Has the sheriff's department charged anybody?
No.
Has the sheriff's department listed Miss Baja as a suspect?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
As to leading,
Yes, Your Honor.
overruled.
Mr. Renard, during the course of your investigation, did you find any physical evidence that shows that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson?
I did not.
Do you know of any evidence at all, in general, that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson?
I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Renard, you work for Summit Life
Yes,
as an investigator
I do.
and a forensic document examiner.
I do.
On August 18th, 2017, the defendant in this case filed a claim with Summit Life,
Yes,
and that was a claim for $5 million.
correct.
Now, you were asked to determine whether the defendant, Karen Baja, forged Lou Donaldson's will
Correct.
in order to determine whether Summit Life had to pay that claim.
Right, exactly. Yes,
So you've worked for Summit Life Insurance for 20 years,
correct.
during which time you've reviewed hundreds of wills.
That would make sense. Yes,
And you have worked in forensic document examination for 23 years.
yes,
You specialize in handwriting identification,
yes,
in identifying forged signatures,
yes,
and fabricated documents.
correct.
Now, Mr. Renard, you did an analysis of the will in this case.
I did.
And in order to do that, you looked at known signatures of Lou Donaldson's,
Yes,
one of which was on the Summit Life Insurance life insurance policy paperwork,
yes,
and a second known signature, which was on Lou Donaldson's driver's license.
yes,
And then you compared the two known signatures to the signature on the will.
yes,
Directing court and counsel to what's being constructively marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3, which for reference is on page 40 of the record. Mr. Renard, I'll direct you to page 40 of the record.
yes, I have it present.
You recognize this?
I do. This is the comparison I completed.
This is from your report.
Yes,
It's a fair and accurate representation of that portion of your report.
yes,
Moving Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 3 will be admitted.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
Now, Mr. Renard, at the top of this document here where it says known signature number 1, that's the signature from Lou Donaldson's Summit Life Insurance paperwork.
yes,
And signature number 2 here is the signature, the known signature from his driver's license.
yes,
And the last signature is the signature on the will.
yes.
Mr. Renard, if you could take a moment to look at these signatures, please.
Yep.
You would agree that there are enough differences in these signatures that your finding is inconclusive.
Yes, I also find sufficient similarities.
But you would agree there are enough differences that your finding is inconclusive.
Yeah, that is correct. I cannot say if it's genuine or non-genuine.
Your finding is inconclusive.
Yes,
And you cannot say that the signature on the will is genuine.
I also can say it's not genuine, or cannot say it's not genuine. It's just inconclusive.
So you would agree that you can't say that the signature on the will is genuine or non-genuine.
Yes.
Right? And you would agree that it's possible someone tried to copy Lou Donaldson's signature on the will?
People have forged signatures in the past. For me, there are sufficient similarities to say that it was not a copy, but I cannot say that with definitive 100% surety.
But you would agree that it's possible someone tried to copy Lou Donaldson's signature on the will?
It is possible because of the slight deficiencies, but not enough that I would overrule the claim. We don't like to give out free money. So, $5 million is a lot of money. So it was enough that the similarities were enough that I said, I do not believe it is non-genuine.
Mr. Renard, you wrote a report in this case?
Yes.
You told the truth?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you said it's possible someone tried to copy Mr. Donaldson's signature?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Renard, do signatures change over time?
They do, yes.
And what might cause a signature to change over time?
Signature may change due to age, health, taking care when signing it, the writing instrument used.
Was Mr. Donaldson much older in this contested signature?
Yes.
Now also, you were hired to investigate 2 reasons about Summit Life, right?
Yes.
Will you tell us those 2 reasons again?
Yes. The 2 reasons I was assigned was to find out whether Ms. Baja killed Lou Donaldson and also whether Ms. Baja forged the last will and testament of Lou Donaldson.
So because this is a wrongful death case, let me ask you about that first question. Did you find any evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. This is
Will this witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you.
The defense calls Karen Baja to the stand.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself to us.
My name is Karen Baja.
Miss Baja, I am just going to ask you, did you kill your husband?
Absolutely not.
Are you in any way, shape, or form responsible for the disappearance of Lou Donaldson?
No, of course not.
Before we talk about what really happened, let's get to know you a little bit better. Where are you from?
I live in Pioneer County, here in Statesville.
What do you do for a living?
I run Wild Wildlife, which is a sanctuary for big cats. It's my absolute passion to care for animals, and I advocate for the protection of large animals.
How did you get involved with Wild Wildlife?
Through Lou, we used to take care of the big cats together.
I want to talk to you about your marriage with Lou Donaldson. How did you two meet?
Well, it all started one night when I was walking through town. Lou was sweet enough to pick me up. The rest was history.
Was Lou married before you two got together?
Yes, he was. He had a kid too, the plaintiff.
How do you perceive your relationship with the plaintiff after you married Lou Donaldson?
I do not think she ever liked me.
Did Mr. Donaldson's family approve of your relationship when you first got married?
No, not at all. Because of the age difference, a lot of people thought that I was just with Lou for the money. But the truth is that Lou took me in and he rescued me. How could I not love him?
Miss Baja, this may be difficult, but could you describe your marital issues with Lou before he disappeared?
Yes, he was always flying back and forth to Costa Rica, sometimes seeing other women, but we were working through it. Or at least I thought we were working through it.
Had you ever threatened him before his disappearance?
No, absolutely not. I know that there is a restraining order saying that I did, but it was denied. I would never threaten or harm Lou.
You just mentioned Costa Rica. How did he get back and forth?
He would fly his planes. He had a suspended license, but he would fly anyway. And he didn't always register his flight plans, so he would stay off the radar.
Was this something he did often?
Yes, he would take off at a moment's notice for business or other matters, but he would always come back.
Miss Baja, let's talk about the weekend that your husband left and he did not come back. Was anything significant happening at Wild Wildlife the weekend of August 17th?
Yes, one of my tigers had just given birth, so I was focused on taking care of the babies that night.
Was there any point where you left the sanctuary?
Yes, in the early morning of August 18, 2012, I had to run to the grocery store to get some milk for the cubs. On my way home from the grocery store, my car broke down. That was around 3 o'clock in the morning.
How were you able to make it back to the sanctuary?
I flagged down a passing car and I used their phone to call my brother.
Miss Baja, why did you choose to call your brother rather than your husband?
Because my brother is the deputy sheriff and I knew he would be on patrol that night, so it was just easier that way. Plus, I was not even sure that my husband would be home and I need to get back to those babies.
Why did you think your husband might not be home?
Like I said, sometimes he would just take spur of the moment flights on his planes.
What did you do when you realized your husband might not be coming home?
I had my brother drive me to the airstrip where Lou's van had been found. Inside of Lou's van were his glasses and his keys.
Miss Baja, why did you have your husband declared legally dead?
I had hoped and prayed that Lou would come back home, but with each passing year, it just became more and more evident that was not going to happen. I thought having him declared would bring us all some much needed closure.
Why did you choose to do this on the 5-year anniversary of Lou's disappearance?
I had to keep the sanctuary up and running. That was Lou's dream. After 5 years of running it all by myself, I needed the money to support the cubs.
Miss Baja, did you love your husband?
Of course, and I still do.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Baja, I'd like to talk to you about what happened around early June of 2012. In early June of 2012, you and Lou Donaldson were still married.
Yes, we were.
And you were still living together.
Yes, like most married couples do.
And you ran Wild Wildlife together?
Yes.
You owned Wild Wildlife together?
Yes.
Now, Wild Wildlife is a big cat sanctuary.
That's right.
You said it's home to tigers and lions?
Yes.
And you loved Wild Wildlife.
I do. I still do.
It was your absolute passion to care for the animals at Wild Wildlife.
Yes.
But Wild Wildlife was also a business.
Yes, that's correct.
And it was valued at $5 million.
Yes, Lou was always very hardworking, and I loved getting to share Wild Wildlife with him.
And Wild Wildlife, again, was worth $5 million.
Yes.
Now, when you met Lou, he was already a millionaire.
Yes, like I said, he was a very hardworking man. That's why I loved him so much.
And he was already a millionaire.
Yes, he did well.
And you met him while hitchhiking.
Yes, like I said, he was so sweet to pick me up that night.
And you said he took you in.
Yes, well, we fell in love with each other.
So he took you in?
I wouldn't say he took me in. We fell in love and we got married.
You, during your direct examination, said he took you in.
Yes, he took me in.
He rescued you.
Yes, sure.
Now I'd like to draw your attention to June 12, 2012. On that day, you learned that Lou didn't want you around him anymore.
I don't know what you mean by that.
On June 12, 2012, you learned that Lou attempted to get a restraining order against you.
Yes, I am aware of the restraining order.
And a restraining order means he didn't want you around him anymore.
Maybe in a brief moment, but as I said, it was denied.
You would agree that a restraining order means that someone can't be around the person who's filing the restraining order against them.
Yes, I know what a restraining order is.
And you would agree that you both worked at Wild Wildlife together.
Yes.
So that restraining order would restrict your access to Wild Wildlife.
I suppose it would.
When Lou would be working at Wild Wildlife, you couldn't be there.
I suppose that would be the case if it were granted.
You couldn't be near the animals.
I suppose not.
You couldn't be near the property.
No.
Now, Ms. Baja, you would agree that this is the will that leaves you all of Lou's real and personal property.
Yes, that is what it says.
And you would agree that the date on this will is the 14th of June, 2012.
Yes, that's right.
And you just acknowledged that 2 days prior, on June 12th, 2012, Lou attempted to go to court so they would protect him from you.
Yes.
So what you're telling us, Ms. Baja, is that 2 days after Lou attempted to file a restraining order against you, he signed a will and testament leaving all of his real and personal property to you whatsoever.
Couples fight and make up all the time. This is what Lou wrote and wanted.
So you would agree that 2 days after he filed that restraining order against you, he signed that will leaving you everything?
Yes, he did.
Now, you would agree that your husband disappeared on between August 17th and August 18th, 2012.
Yes.
And you had nothing to do with his disappearance.
No, of course not. Like I said earlier.
Let me ask you about what you were doing on the day he disappeared. Now, it just so happens that on the day your husband disappeared, you left your house at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, like I said, one of my tigers had just given birth, and sometimes they reject the cubs, so I had to go run to the store late at night to get some milk for them.
And it just so happens that you had to leave your house at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I mean, I can't decide when the tigers get hungry.
And it just so happens that that made you leave your house at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, I had to.
And it just so happens that you didn't have your phone with you.
No, I forgot it back home.
And it just so happens that while driving back from the grocery store, your car broke down.
Yes.
And it just so happens that shortly thereafter, a stranger drove by.
Yes, there was another car on the road, fortunately.
And it just so happens that you were able to call your brother using a stranger's cell phone.
Yes, I did call my brother.
And you called your brother because you said you weren't sure your husband would be home.
No, I wasn't positive about that.
Your husband has a cell phone or had a cell phone?
I believe so.
And you didn't call his cell phone?
No, I didn't. My brother was a deputy sheriff, and I knew he would be on night patrol.
It just so happens that you knew he'd be working the graveyard shift that day.
Yes, he is my brother, so.
And it just so happened you knew he'd be working at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
And all of that just so happened to occur on the night your husband disappeared.
Yes.
It was all a complete coincidence.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Baja, why did you love Wild Wildlife?
Because I loved Lou, and he loved Wild Wildlife too.
When you met Lou that night as he was passing through town, did you know he was a millionaire?
No, it was really just love at first sight. After all, my husband did drive an old beat-up van.
What happened with the temporary restraining order?
Like I said, it was denied, and Lou and I continued to work together.
And the night where you had to go out to the grocery store, why did you choose to call your brother?
Like I said, I knew he would be working. He's a deputy, so he always has the graveyard shift. I was on the side of the road and I was scared, and I knew my brother would know exactly what to do.
No further questions, Your Honor. May this witness be excused?
Yes. Does defense have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests, and we do have a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
May we be heard outside of the presence of the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, the defense renews its Rule 50 motion judgment as viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the plaintiff. No reasonable jury could find that by the preponderance of the evidence that the plaintiff has proved that Karen Baja recklessly or intentionally caused the death of Lou Donaldson, as they have failed to prove how or even when Lou Donaldson died. They have not produced any evidence to show any act on Ms. Baja's part to prove their case.
While I appreciate the motion, understanding the forum, I do believe that there is sufficient evidence to submit to the jury. And with that, I guess we proceed to closing. So the party's ready to proceed, or do we need a break?
Plaintiff is ready to proceed to closing, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready.
Okay.
Your Honor, I do have a request. Could we have a time check, please?
I believe there is someone in the courtroom who is taking the time, and it is not me. Is anyone here taking time?
I have been taking time for the defense.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor, I've been keeping track of time for the plaintiff.
Okay, so where are we?
The plaintiff has plenty of time remaining. I have just about, I believe, 18 minutes left for closing arguments.
Great. Is there anything else we need to address before closings?
Your Honor, may I reserve 2 minutes of my time for rebuttal?
You may.
Thank you.
And as a note, the defense has about 20 minutes remaining.
Great, thank you. Plaintiff, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, as my co-counsel Colleen Latoile told you at the beginning of the trial, in this case, the truth is in the timeline. When the defendant staged her husband's disappearance and faked his last will and testament, she made critical mistakes on the timeline of alleged events. We have shown you all of those mistakes at trial today. Now, the judge has instructed you on circumstantial evidence. And because this case is built on compelling circumstantial evidence, I want to remind you what that is. Circumstantial evidence is evidence that can be reasonably inferred from other facts. And it is just as compelling as direct evidence. It is just as strong. Now, when the defendant dated the phony last will and testament June 14th, 2012, she failed to realize that the date she chose was just 2 days after her husband sought protection from her in the form of a restraining order from the court. And now she expects you to believe that 2 days after filing that restraining order to protect himself, he turned around and signed a last will and testament granting her absolutely all of his real and personal property whatsoever. Members of the jury, that simply does not make sense. And that's how we know this will is a fake. But we don't have to rely on that fact alone. Today, we heard from forensic document examiner Taylor Pride. He examined that will and determined it was not genuine. You'll have that fake last will and testament in the jury room with you today. And you'll also see those 2 known signatures that the defense expert looked at. Compare them again for yourselves, and you will come to the exact same conclusion that our forensic document examiner did. That will was not signed by Lou Donaldson. Members of the jury, the truth is in the timeline. The defendant killed her husband and staged his disappearance on August 17th, 2012. Then she fired Cam Donaldson on August 20th, 2012. By August 20th, 2012, Lou Donaldson had only been gone for a weekend. And the defendant acknowledged on the stand today that Lou would often fly away and not tell her where he was going, but she knew he was always coming back. And yet, on August 20th, she fired Cam, Lou's only child, from her position as his trusted assistant at Wild Wild Life. Now, this was only 3 days after Lou had allegedly disappeared. So why did she fire Cam only 3 days after he allegedly disappeared? Because she got too excited. She didn't let enough time pass to make the course of events seem reasonable. Can you imagine what would happen if Lou came back from a routine weekend trip to find that his wife had fired his daughter from her position as his assistant? The only reason the defendant knew she could fire Cam Donaldson on August 20th was because she knew that Lou Donaldson was never coming back to wild, wild life. The truth is in the timeline. Now, the defendant has told us a very convenient story about needing to go to the grocery store at 3 a.m. and having her car break down without her cell phone on the very night that Lou disappeared. She wants you to believe that it is all a total coincidence. Members of the jury, her story is nothing more than a cover-up of the fact that she was out and about that night, moving Lou's van to an airstrip with her brother. Now, how do we know that? First, if we're to believe her story, we have to believe that the defendant knew her brother's work schedule offhand. Second, we'd have to believe that there's a grocery store in Pioneer near the defendant's house that's open at 3 o'clock in the morning, something that there is no evidence to corroborate. Third, we'd have to believe that the defendant, without her cell phone, could dial her brother's work phone number by heart. Members of the jury, these are the kinds of numbers that people typically don't have memorized these days. But in the defendant's story, of course she knew her brother's work phone number by heart, and of course she knew that he would definitely be working the graveyard shift that very night. Fourth, and this is the biggest stretch, we would have to believe that she, broken down on the side of the road at 3 o'clock in the morning without a cell phone, would not call Lou Donaldson when she first got the chance to. I can't imagine anyone in that position not calling their spouse, even if they were just to call them to tell them what was going on. Members of the jury, if you believe the defendant is not telling the truth about where she was at 3 o'clock in the morning on the day Lou disappeared, then you believe she is responsible for his death. There is no other reason for her lying about where she was at 3 o'clock in the morning that day. And that means it is more likely than not that she killed him. Compelling circumstantial evidence. The defendant didn't call Lou Donaldson because the defendant knew Lou Donaldson was already dead. At some point, the coincidences just overwhelmed the defendant's claims. And the truth? Well, the truth is in the timeline. Now, as the plaintiff, we have the burden of proving this case by a preponderance of the evidence. And when you think of preponderance of the evidence, I want you to picture a balanced scale with one side for the plaintiff and the other side for the defendant. And I want you to imagine placing a feather on one side. If after weighing all of the evidence presented to you today, the scales shift just that much in favor of the plaintiff, you must find for Cam Donaldson. And we have proven the elements of wrongful death to you by a preponderance of the evidence. Element one, it is more likely than not that Lou Donaldson is dead. There was no dispute at trial today that no one has seen or heard from Lou since August 17th, 2012, and there is no dispute that there hasn't been any activity on his financial account since that date. Element two, it's more likely than not that the defendant caused his death because there is no other reason why she would have to lie about where she was at 3 o'clock in the morning the day he disappeared. Element three, it is certainly more likely than not that Cam Donaldson has suffered an injury from the loss of her father, the family business, and losing his estate, which was everything Lou built while he was alive. Element 4, it's more likely than not that the defendant caused that injury by killing Cam's father, staging his disappearance, and faking his last will and testament. Now we're asking you to hold the defendant responsible in 2 ways. Find her liable for the wrongful death of Lou Donaldson and award Lou's only child, Cam Donaldson, damages. Cam told you how her life was changed forever when she lost her father. She will never again go to her dad's house for a Sunday supper, never again come into work on a Monday morning to check in with him. Now, of course, you can't bring her father back here today, but you can give her back everything the defendant took from her. The $5 million life insurance policy that she wrongfully collected on, and his estate worth another $5 million. Do not let the defendant profit from her despicable actions. Return what is rightfully and fairly Cam Donaldson's. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. Apologize for my lights. They automatically kicked on here in the library. Sorry. This case was never about finding Lou Donaldson. It was never about justice. It was never about Karen Baja. This case was about one thing and one thing only: money. Money the plaintiff felt that she was entitled to, but did not get. The plaintiff was never searching for answers. She was only seeking revenge against Karen Baja, the woman that her father loved, the woman that her father married. And because the plaintiff is seeking revenge, that is why she brought this suit today. And she must prove by the greater weight of the evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson. But the evidence has shown today that there is absolutely no evidence proving that. The plaintiff has failed to prove how Lou Donaldson died, when Lou Donaldson died, and most certainly that Karen Baja caused his death. Lou Donaldson disappeared on August 17, 2012, and he had a fleet of planes. So many planes that his own daughter did not know how many he owned. And he often flew to Costa Rica. The plaintiff had to admit that today. But what's even more important is that Lou Donaldson was flying with a suspended license. And because he was flying with a suspended license, he did not log any of his flight plans, because he knew if he logged those flight plans, it would show that someone with an invalid license was flying a plane. His plane would be grounded. Lou Donaldson flew wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, without telling anyone anything. He would fly off in a moment's notice. And that's important today because nobody knows what happened to Lou Donaldson. Nobody. Maybe he died flying to Costa Rica. We know that Costa Rica is 2,200 miles away over nothing but ocean. And it would take 3 to 4 tanks of gas for his plane to even get there. Taylor Pride even sent an investigator to Costa Rica. Did not find anybody. Mr. Donaldson is a secretive man. He met the love of his life when he was driving around late one night. He never logged his flight plans. He has a mistress in Costa Rica. Maybe when he got to Costa Rica, he fell victim to that mistress. Maybe when he got to Costa Rica, he was murdered, kidnapped. Maybe when he was flying over that 2,200 miles of ocean, he ran out of gas and crashed, never to be heard or seen from again. The truth is, nobody knows what happened to Lou Donaldson. But everyone knows that Karen Baja is not responsible for his death. And the plaintiff knows it. And because the plaintiff knows that they cannot prove their case, they've tried to make this entire trial about a will. So I need to discuss that will with you. The plaintiff called in Taylor Pride today, and Taylor Pride told you that there's no doubt about it. The will is 100% forged. But let's think about who Taylor Pride is. Taylor Pride was hired by the defendant. Taylor Pride was paid by the defendant. Taylor Pride only interviewed the defendant. Taylor Pride's only evidence was produced by the plaintiff. Was hired by the plaintiff. And the only evidence he looked at was hired by the plaintiff. But you also heard from Chris Renard, who was not paid by the plaintiff and was not paid by the defense. He was paid by Summit Life Insurance Company to investigate whether Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson. He conducted his own independent investigation and found there was not one single piece of evidence that showed that Karen Baja killed Lou. He recommended to Summit Life that they pay Ms. Baja's claim. But let's think about that for a second. Everyone here knows how insurance companies operate. You've got a $5 million life insurance hanging on the line here. If Summit Life would have seen one shred of evidence that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson, they would have denied that claim in a New York minute. And the plaintiff knows it. So the plaintiff has also talked about the language in the will. The specific language, if I should die or disappear. And we admit, that's odd language for the ordinary man. But Lou Donaldson is not the ordinary man, ladies and gentlemen. Lou Donaldson owned a $5 million estate, owned a fleet of planes, and would often fly 2,200 miles over nothing but ocean. He wrote, if I should die or disappear, for one reason or one reason only. Because he knew that his actions, him flying around without telling anyone where he was going or what he was doing, might end up causing his death. He might crash his plane into the ocean. He did what any loving husband would do. He prepared for the worst, and he protected his wife. He made sure that the woman he loved was taken care of. He made sure that if anything happened to him, that Karen Baja would have the resources to take care of wild wildlife, to take care of those baby tigers, to take care of all the exotic animals that they work together to build. That's why he put, if I should die or disappear, in his will, because he wanted to make sure the love of his life was taken care of. No matter how hard the plaintiff wants to make this case a will contest or a forgery contest, it's not. This is a wrongful death suit, and the plaintiff has to prove that Karen Baja did something to kill Lou Donaldson. But what is the plaintiff left with now? Alleged threats that only came from the plaintiff? Now, the plaintiff mentioned the restraining order that Mr. Lou Donaldson filed for, and it's true, he did file for that restraining order, but it was not dismissed, it was denied. It was denied by a judge in this state. And the reason it was denied is because there's no evidence showing that Karen Baja was threatening Lou. Now, the plaintiff kept repeating, truth is in the timeline. Let's look at the timelines. Well, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Let's look at the timelines. But let's look at the timelines of the plaintiff. The plaintiff did not mention one thing to one person the entire 5 years that Lou Donaldson was gone. The plaintiff did not get involved in this case till the money was involved, till the money she thought she was entitled to was given to Karen Baja. Days after Lou Donaldson's disappearance, the plaintiff was right in front of the police, face to face with the police, and did not say one thing to them, did not say, hey, my father's missing. I think Karen's responsible. Did not say, hey, my father said, if I disappear, look at Karen. Did not say one thing until the money was involved. Timelines. Timelines are important. The plaintiff did not file this suit 2012, 2013, 2014. Waited until the money was involved and attempted to seek revenge against Karen Baja. I want to talk to you today about the most important evidence. And sometimes no evidence is the most important evidence. Lou Donaldson's been disappeared now for 8 years. And the very day that Lou Donaldson disappeared, the Pioneer County Sheriff's Department launched a full tilt investigation into his disappearance. Think about that. They had the full time and resources of the entire state, multiple police officers, multiple investigations, multiple investigators did not find one piece of evidence. They went to wildlife. No blood, no DNA, no evidence. They inspected Lou Donaldson's van where he was last seen. No blood, no DNA, no evidence. They went to Lou Donaldson's home. No blood, no DNA, no evidence. No sign of a struggle anywhere. The plaintiff has to prove that Karen Baja did something, anything, to cause Lou Donaldson's death. That she stabbed him, killed him, or shot him, kidnapped him, did something, drowned him, did something. The plaintiff has failed to even mention a murder weapon or any type of plan or scheme to get rid of Mr. Donaldson. There's absolutely no evidence. Months after Lou Donaldson's disappearance, the police department did not list Karen Baja as a suspect, did not charge Karen Baja, did not arrest Karen Baja. 5 years after the investigation, did not list Karen as a suspect, did not charge Karen, did not even suspect foul play. Up to this very moment, as I'm speaking to you today, ladies and gentlemen, and as Karen Baja sits here fighting for her life, fighting for her livelihood, the sheriff's department has not listed her as a suspect, has not charged her, has not arrested her. Fortunately, in this country, we do not find somebody liable because the plaintiff comes in here and makes some outlandish claim. We do not find someone liable when the plaintiff is spreading rumors. We do not find somebody liable and call them a murderer when the plaintiff is seeking revenge because she didn't get the money she thought she was entitled to. Fortunately, in this country, in our system of justice, we make everyone prove their case. The plaintiff has not proved their case today. The plaintiff has failed to show how Lou Donaldson died, when he died, and most certainly, most importantly, that Karen Baja killed him. That she killed her own husband? No. When you go back into the jury room today, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have two separate forms, verdict form A and verdict form B. Like I said, the most important evidence sometimes is no evidence. The most logical conclusion is finding Karen Baja not liable. The plaintiff is not searching for answers. She was only seeking revenge. Karen Baja is not liable. Find her not liable. Thank you.
And plaintiff has 2 minutes remaining. You can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense just reduced a daughter's grief to outlandish claims and the spread of rumors. They reduced her claims here in court today to seeking revenge and seeking money. Cam Donaldson isn't seeking revenge. She is seeking what is rightfully and fairly hers, the legacy that her father built while he was alive. Now, defense counsel said there's no blood, no DNA, and no evidence. Although we can't produce blood or DNA, we certainly did produce evidence. The defense counsel knows that testimony is evidence, and we presented to you evidence by a preponderance of the evidence, during Cam Donaldson's testimony and during the testimony of our expert. The defense said everyone knows that Karen Baja is not responsible for Lou's death. Well, the plaintiff and our expert would disagree. During their testimony, they told you that Karen was responsible for Lou Donaldson's death. The defense also told you that you have to look to the greater weight of the evidence. That's not exactly true. You have to look to a preponderance of evidence, whether it's more likely than not that Karen Baja, the defendant, caused Lou Donaldson's death. And in our country, in our system of justice, That's the burden of proof in a civil case. This isn't a criminal case. We don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt how Karen did this. We don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Lou Donaldson is dead. We have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence. And we've done that here today. We proved the 4 elements of a wrongful death by a preponderance of the evidence. If that scale of a preponderance of the evidence tips even that much in favor of the plaintiff, you must find for Cam Donaldson and hold the defendant liable for the wrongful death of Lou Donaldson. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone did fantastic. This was really, really fun to watch. Thank you. I don't think there's anything else that we need to go over. I've never done one of these virtually before. You all did fantastic job though.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is a really interesting case.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, that's for sure.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, everyone.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you very much. You as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night, everybody.